This isn't your place anymore. You're just a burden. Those words hit me harder than a falling beam. They came from Harper, my daughter's fiancé, with a grin that told me he meant every letter. I stood there on the rooftop, lanterns swaying in the evening wind, holding a thick envelope stuffed with copies of bank wires. That envelope was proof of $120,000, the very money that bought this penthouse view. I didn't shout. At 68. I've learned silence can cut deeper than noise. My daughter Noelle looked at me, the way a stranger might glance at a waiter who brought the wrong drink. She didn't correct him. She didn't defend me. She simply adjusted her ring so it caught the light of the Hudson. I felt the railing cold beneath my palm, as if even the steel wanted to remind me I was on borrowed ground. If you've ever been told to disappear from a home you helped build, tell me where you're watching from and subscribe so I know these words land somewhere. We need to talk about families and money. The rooftop buzzed with guests clinking glasses, laughing over oysters I had paid for. Nobody noticed me. Slide the envelope beside a bowl of limes. They saw a party. I saw a balance sheet. 3 years ago, I sold my Brooklyn townhouse, the one with a fence nail still holding my late wife's straw hat. I wired away a lifetime of savings so my daughter could rise higher than I ever did. Now, in this glass-walled palace, I was treated like an unpaid intern loitering in the break room. I thought of that townhouse key still on my ring. Useless now. Cold brass scratching my thigh through the pocket. A man measures his worth in keys, what doors he can open, what rooms he belongs in. Tonight, my keys meant nothing. Dad, tonight is about momentum. Noelle murmure, her voice polished, like the PR speeches she delivers for clients. Positive energy only. She gave me the smile she once practiced in the bathroom mirror with her mother. A smile designed for cameras, not fathers. Harper leaned closer. You helped once. That was generous. But boundaries are healthy. Find a hotel. At least until after the honeymoon. The saxophone player struck up Sinatra in the background, and the irony nearly made me laugh. Boundaries. They called it exile by another name. I gripped the envelope tighter. Inside were not just bank wires, but my dignity, pressed flat in legalese, and stamps. They believed they were the only owners of this life. They forgot that paper remembers. On the bar, a stack of place cards waited. One said family. I placed my fingertip on it, holding it down against the wind. It felt like an oath broken right under my skin. I won't spoil what came next. The legal twist belongs to another chapter. But you should know I did not leave empty-handed that night. The catering contracts carried my signature. The band's deposit came from my card. The venue's overtime clause bore my initials. Every laugh, every sip, every sparkling dress on that rooftop stood on ground I had paid for. They wanted me invisible, yet they were leaning on my shadow. I asked quietly, "Where would you like me to go?" My voice sounded like an old radio. Soft, but still working. Harper Strugel? Careless, as a man flipping through channels. There's a Hampton near the highway. Noelle added, "We'll talk after the honeymoon." As if my life could be postponed like a meeting. The elevator doors opened. I pressed the button with steady hands, though my heart beat like a hammer against tin. I left before the toast, before they could raise their glasses and erase me entirely. In the taxi, I asked the driver to take the long route by the river. The Hudson does not care about ownership. It flows regardless. That comforted me. In the hotel, I laid the papers across the stiff bedspread envelope on the left, folder on the right, phone in the middle. My tools now. A club sandwich arrived on a tray. Rituals matter, even when the ground is shifting. I ate slowly, tasting every bite, letting the bread soak up my fury. I will explain the contracts, the deeds, and the detective later. For now, remember this. Boundaries are not bridges burned. They are gates finally closed. That night, on a rooftop in Manhattan, I stopped being the man who nodded quietly. I became the man who pressed the lever. Tell me where you are listening from, and if your family ever treated your sacrifice as disposable, leave a comment. Sometimes our only power is to speak the truth out loud. I checked into the hotel that first night with nothing more than a small suitcase, the envelope of wires, and the ache of a man who has been demoted from father to liability. The Hampton lobby smelled of lemon polish and tired travelers. I sat there a long while, watching families check in with too many bags, their children clutching stuffed animals. They looked at each other the way I once looked at Noelle and her mother, like they were permanent. I envied them. When I finally lay on the stiff mattress, I stared at the ceiling and thought about the townhouse I sold. It was a narrow brownstone in Brooklyn, the kind you walk past without noticing until you live in it. My wife and I painted the shutters herself one spring. Dark green with cheap brushes that left bristles in the paint. We made it ours. Every nail, every creak. And then, for my daughter's dream, I let it go. $120,000. That is what the buyer's check said. I handed it over to my daughter like it was oxygen. I told myself, she will never forget who gave her this start. Now I see I was wrong. The morning after the rooftop party, I walked back to the penthouse. Not inside, just close enough to look up at the tall glass windows. I knew they were eating brunch with Harper's family, clinking mimosas, speaking about future growth. They didn't see me. Maybe they wouldn't have cared if they had. I was just a shadow on the sidewalk. That afternoon, I dialed my lawyer, Margaret Chen. She had been by my side since my wife's passing, guiding me through estate papers and retirement accounts. Her voice was steady, a metronome in the chaos. "Edward, what happened?" she asked, after I explained the scene. "They called my investment a one-time help. They want me out." I said, "Do you remember the documents we filed with the state when you wired that money?" I frowned. "Of course. But it was for them, for their home." Margaret's tone sharpened. "Edward, it was filed as an equity contribution. On paper, you hold 35% ownership of their startup entity. They've treated it like a gift. It is not." I sat silent, the receiver warm against my ear. 35%. It sounded like a lifeline thrown into a storm. Later that week, Noelle called me. Her voice was thin, like she was speaking through gauze. "Dad, Harper feels you were confrontational," she said. "Confrontational?" I asked. I asked where I should sleep. "Well, maybe just give us space. You already helped once. We need to move forward without strings." Strings. That is how she described her father's lifeline. I closed my eyes and remembered her as a child tugging at my sleeve, begging me to stay for one more bedtime story. Now she wanted to cut the thread entirely. I did not argue. I simply said, "I understand." Then I hung up. Understanding can sound like surrender. Sometimes it is just strategy. The following weekend, I overheard a conversation that sealed my resolve. They were in the lobby when I walked in, Noelle in a dress the color of cream, Harper in tailored gray. They did not notice me behind the column. "This place is perfect, once we clear out Dad's stuff." Harper said, "Yoga studio." Noelle asked, "Or office?" He answered. They both laughed. The guest room that had been mine for months was already repurposed in their minds. I was not family. I was square footage. I returned to my hotel room and laid the folder flat on the table. My hands shook not with weakness but with clarity. The folder contained more than receipts. It was a record of my value. Proof that I was not a guest in their story. I whispered to the photograph of my late wife on the nightstand. I am not done. My love, they will see. Margaret called again that evening. If you choose, she said, we can file a notice of intent to partition. That would force a sale, unless they buy out your share. And if they cannot buy me out, I asked, then the market decides. You take your share. They take theirs. The law is not sentimental. Edward. Her words sat heavy but true. Sentiment had left the rooftop when Harper opened his mouth. I want you to imagine something with me. Picture yourself in a room filled with laughter. The air smelling of roses and roasted lamb. Glass lifted high. Now imagine that every joke, every toast, every sparkle of light above you is being paid for with your sacrifice, and yet you are invisible in that room. That is where I stood. That is where many of you have stood. So here is my mini hook for you. The contracts were not just mine, the caterer, the band. The very air of that night still answered to my signature. I will explain in the next chapter what I did with that power. For now, tell me, have you ever watched your own child treat you like an afterthought? Comment if you know that sting. I woke early the next morning. The hotel curtains heavy and reluctant to let the light in. The tray from last night's sandwich still sat on the table. Crumbs lined up like soldiers who had lost their war. I pushed it aside and spread the folder open. The notary stamp caught the glow from the bedside lamp. That little raised seal carried more weight than all the champagne glasses clinked on that rooftop. I dialed Margaret. Me, Lavier? She answered on the second ring. As steady as ever. Edward. I've been thinking about you since we spoke. She said. I need to know exactly where I stand. I replied. Noel and Harper believe my $120,000 was a gift. Margaret's keyboard clicked in the background. Edward, on record, you are a 35% owner of their limited liability company. That money was filed as capital, not charity. Harper never signed the acknowledgement we sent, which means your rights remain untouched. I sat very still, my hand over the envelope as if it might breathe. 35%, not invisible, not erased. A co-owner with legal standing. I thought about Harper's words again. This isn't your place anymore. You're just a burden. I almost laughed then. Burden, without my money. There would be no penthouse. No rooftop party. No shiny ring catching the Hudson light. They had dressed me as unnecessary. But on paper, I was stitched into the very seams of their life. Margaret's voice broke my thoughts. If you choose to exercise your rights, you can force a sale. They would either have to buy you out at current market value or watch the asset liquidate. Either way, you take your share. And if they can't afford to buy me out, I asked, then their perfect glass palace becomes a listing on the market. She said, and you walk away with cash in hand. I pictured Harper's face at the thought of losing that view. That rooftop. For once, it was not my pulse that quickened, but my resolve. Later that day, Noelle called me. Her tone was clipped. Rehearsed. Dad, Harper thinks you're overreacting. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I kept my voice calm. Overreacting. I sold my home. I wired $120,000. And now you tell me to vanish. It was support, she said. Parents help. That's what they do. Help, my voice cracked. But not from weakness. Noelle. Help is a casserole when you're sick. Help is babysitting a child for a night. $120,000 is not help. It's investment. It's trust. And it has terms. She went silent. I imagined her in the glossy kitchen, Harper mouthing instructions beside her. Finally, she whispered, "Please don't ruin this for us." I ended the call, because sometimes the most powerful word a father can say is nothing. That evening, I walked past the building again. Through the window, I saw Harper on a video call, showing off the penthouse, as if he were the sole architect of it. My blood tightened in my veins. They were proud enough to flaunt what they hadn't earned, yet bold enough to discard the one who had made it possible. I called Margaret once more. "File the notice," I said. "Are you certain?" she asked. "I am past certainty. I am in truth now." She promised to draft the paperwork first thing Monday. That night, for the first time since my wife died, I slept soundly, because I was no longer at their mercy. They were at mine. But before the law could move its gears, I realized something else. The catering contracts for their grand reception carried my signature. The band deposit had been charged to my card. The country club reservation for the rehearsal dinner was under my name. All of it, every toast, every dance, every staged photograph stood on ground I still controlled. So I made a call. The manager at the country club sounded startled when I requested cancellation. "Sir, the food is prepped. The staff scheduled. It's less than 24 hours away." "I understand," I said evenly, "and I will cover the cancellation fee. But the contract is in my name. Please cancel everything." I hung up and stared out at the Manhattan skyline. For once, it wasn't the city that looked merciless. It was me. I will not spoil what happened when Harper and Noel discovered their glittering evening had crumbled before it began. That deserves its own chapter. But understand this, the first legal strike wasn't the cancellation. It was the moment I stopped believing I was powerless. If you have ever been dismissed as irrelevant after giving everything, tell me in the comments. Sometimes the first step to reclaiming your dignity is saying, "No more." The call came late at night, nearly midnight, the hotel room glowing with the pale light of a muted television. My phone rattled against the nightstand until I answered. Harper's voice shot through like a siren. "What did you do?" I leaned back against the headboard. Calm as still water, "I honored your request." I said, "You told me I didn't belong?" So I stepped aside. "The country club agreed to cancel your reception." "You can't be serious," Harper screamed. 200 guests are expecting dinner tomorrow. "Do you know what this does to us?" I smiled into the dark. "I imagine it makes you resourceful adults. Perhaps you'll find a solution. McDonald's caters now." "I hear." Noel's voice slipped onto the line, shaking, but not with sorrow, with rage. "Dad, you're destroying our wedding." "No," I said softly. "You'll still be married. You'll just have to pay for your own party." The next day, while they scrambled, I enjoyed a quiet breakfast at the hotel. The newspaper headlines were about markets and politics, but I knew the true story of the day was unfolding in a hall across town. By afternoon, my phone showed dozens of missed calls and frantic messages. I ignored them, sipping coffee slowly, savoring control for the first time in years. At 3 o'clock, the news traveled faster than champagne could pour. The grand rooftop celebration had collapsed. Guests, dressed in finery, found locked doors and empty tables. A video leaked onto social media. Harper standing on the curb in his suit, shouting into a phone while Noelle sobbed in her veil. Within hours, the clip circled the internet under captions like "Wedding of the Year Cancelled" and "Bride Left Crying Outside." I watched it on my phone, the volume low, and felt no guilt. I had not left them hungry. I had left them honest. By evening, they stormed into my hotel lobby. Harper's face burned crimson. "You humiliated us," he spat. I rose slowly from the armchair. Careful with my knees. No, I answered. You humiliated yourselves when you decided the man who built your foundation no longer mattered. You'll regret this. Harper hissed. I met his stare. And steady. The only regret I carry is selling my home to fund your arrogance. But regret ends today. Noelle tried a different approach. Her voice, softer, almost pleading. Dad, people will think we're broke. They'll think we're failures. I let the pause stretch before answering. Maybe they will. Maybe they should. Failure can teach where indulgence never will. The true humiliation wasn't just the canceled party. It was the truth I let slip out. Like a seam finally tearing. Do you even realize? I told them that I have been covering your utility bills, your groceries, to your car insurance. Over the past 3 years, I've given you more than $37,000 beyond the down payment. That's not generosity anymore. That's allowance. Their faces shifted shock for Noelle, fury for Harper. I continued before they could interrupt. And allowances can be discontinued. Silence. Not the comfortable silence of family, but the suffocating kind that tells you the air has changed. Later, I walked them to the elevator as though escorting strangers. Harper muttered under his breath, "We'll fix this. We'll find a way around you." I almost laughed. Around me, you'd need to walk on air, because the ground beneath you is mine. The contracts, the receipts, the ownership. You think you cut me out, but you were standing on my shoulders the whole time. The elevator closed, their reflections shrinking to nothing. That night, I poured myself a drink, just one, and stared out the hotel window at the skyline. The city was merciless, but merciless in a way I could respect. It never pretended to love you. Family, on the other hand, can cut deeper by pretending until the blade sinks. I thought of my wife again, her voice gentle in memory. Don't let them treat you small. Edward, you built too much to vanish. She had been gone 10 years. Yet she was right there, studying me. Here's the mini-hook. Canceling the reception was only a spark. The real fire would come when they tried to paint me as senile. When they called the police to brand me incompetent. That, I promise, is where the story sharpens. If you've ever been accused of losing your mind simply because you stood up for yourself, tell me in the comments. I want to know I am not the only one. The knock on my hotel door came 2 mornings later. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a neat suit, badge on his belt, patience in his eyes. I opened the door slowly. "Mr. Hale?" he asked. "Yes. Detective Rivera, New York Police Department. We've received a report about possible elder financial abuse. I need to ask you a few questions." I let him in. The room still smelled of last night's coffee. He looked around, noting the folder spread on the table, the neat stacks of paper, the notary stamp gleaming under the lamp. "Mr. Hale, the report suggests you might be experiencing cognitive decline, that perhaps your daughter and her fiancé were concerned about your financial decisions." I barked a short laugh. Concerned. They're concerned now because I cut off their allowance. I spread the papers across the table bank wires. Contracts. Receipts. Each one a nail in the coffin of their accusation. Detective. In the past 3 years, I have provided over $120,000 as investment capital, plus $37,000 more in what they called emergencies. Utility bills. Car repère? Credit cards. Do you see a pattern? Rivera studied the documents, his brow furrowing. That's substantial. Substantial enough. I said. That when I finally said no, they decided I must be losing my mind. I handed him my phone, queued up a voicemail from Noelle left at 3 in the morning. Her voice cracked with anger. Dad, this is insane behavior. Normal people don't destroy weddings over hurt feelings. Maybe you need help? Harper thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. Rivera listened, then nodded. I'll need to file this as unfounded. You're clearly competent, but I will note the ongoing financial pressure. Competent. Such a small word. Yet it felt like armor sliding into place. That evening, Margaret came to meet me at the hotel. She placed another envelope on the table. Inside was a video file, something my late wife had recorded before she passed. A simple message stored in the cloud. My throat tightened as I pressed play. She sat in our old kitchen, her hair thinner, but her eyes steady. Edward, if you're watching this, it means I'm gone. You know how much I trust you with our daughter. But if ever there comes a day when money confuses love, I'll remember this. What you gave her was investment, not a gift. Protect yourself. Protect what we built. Her voice wrapped around me like the smell of fresh bread. Proof, not just of my sanity, but of intent. She had known. She had prepared me. When Harper and Noelle discovered the welfare check had failed, their fury boiled over. Harper cornered me in the hotel lobby, his voice loud enough to turn heads. You think you've won because some detective believed you. We'll drag this through court. We'll bury you in legal fees. I stood slowly, buttoning my jacket. Son, I spent a career in construction. I know exactly how much weight a foundation can hold before it cracks. Your foundation is paper and pride. Mine is contracts and law. Noelle's eyes brimmed, but not with apology, with fear. Dad, please. You'll ruin us. I looked at her for a long time. No, Noelle, I'm going to save myself. Whether you ruin yourselves is up to you. A week later, we sat across from each other in Margaret's office. Dark wood shelves lined with law books. A window overlooking Midtown. The air smelled faintly of leather and coffee. Margaret spread the documents like cards on a table. Edward holds 35% ownership in your company. She stated plainly. He is within his rights to demand buyout or sale. Harper shifted in his seat, trying to mask panic. We didn't know. You would have known. Margaret replied, if you had signed the acknowledgement forms, but you ignored them for 3 years. Noella reached for my hand, tears streaking her cheeks. Dad, don't do this. We're family. I pulled my hand away gently. Family doesn't tell you to disappear. Family doesn't call the police to paint you incompetent. The terms were clear. They could buy my share at fair market value. Or we would sell the penthouse and the company shares. Harper muttered about loans. Noelle, about reputations. I sat quietly, watching them struggle. For the first time, the balance of power shifted. I was no longer the father desperate to be included. I was the co-owner, the investor, the man they could not erase. Here's the hook. The choice I gave them was simple. But what happened when their own family, Harper's mother, took my side? That part comes next. If you've ever had an in-law surprise you with unexpected honesty, share it in the comments. Sometimes the truth comes from the place you least expect. 2 weeks into their 30-day deadline, I opened my hotel door to find a woman with carefully styled gray hair and eyes that had seen too many storms. She introduced herself as Margaret Hawthorne Harper's mother. She carried a bottle of wine in one hand and resolve in the other. May I come in? She asked. I stepped aside. We sat at the small table, glasses between us. She didn't waste time. I wanted to thank you, she said, for showing my son who he really is. and for holding Noelle accountable. 2. They have lived too long, believing money appears by magic. You cut the curtain. Her honesty startled me. I had expected defense. Excuses. Please. Instead, she offered alignment. I told Harper I would not give him another cent to bail out his lifestyle. If he wants to keep that penthouse, he must buy you out with his own work. I leaned back, studying her. For the first time in weeks, I felt less alone. That night, I considered my options. 1. Force a sale. Split the proceeds. And watch them downsize to reality. 2. Accept a reduced buyout, allowing them to scrape together enough to keep the property. 3. Hold my stake and remind them monthly of the ground they stood on. Each choice carried weight. Each choice was a lesson. A week later, Margaret Chen convened us again. Harper looked frayed. Noël le parle. They had a proposal, a home equity loan covering $60,000 and a plan to pay the rest in installments. I studied their budget. Restaurant meals $400 a month. Shopping sprees. Streaming subscriptions. Gym memberships barely used. It was not a budget. It was denial on paper. No, I said firmly. You will not borrow against tomorrow to fix today. If you want my concession, you will live within your means. Noelle's lip trembled. Dad, please, what do you want from us? I want accountability. I answered. Sell one of your cars. Cancel what you don't use. And you, I looked at, Harper must work more than charm. And you, Noelle, must get a job. You are 39 years old. You have a degree. Earned. They stared at me, stunned. For them, my words were harsher than the cancellation, harsher than the notice of sale. Yet they signed the agreement Margaret drafted. 2 years of conditions. Monthly check-ins. Failure meant full repayment, due immediately. 6 months later, I sat in a bright senior community apartment. 2 bedrooms with a view of a walking trail. My walls were lined with books again. And for the first time in years, my furniture matched my peace. The phone rang. Noelle's voice was lighter than I remembered. Dad, I got the promotion. Office manager now. She laughed. A real laugh. Not polished for optics. I never thought I'd be proud of working, but I am. I felt something unclench in my chest. You always had the skill. I told her. You just never had to use it. She paused, then said, I owe you an apology. A real one. I treated you like an ATM. I forgot you were a man with a life. Not a machine. I see that now. I closed my eyes, letting the words wash over me. They didn't erase the pain, but they softened it. In the months that followed, small changes bloomed. Harper picked up extra work. Noelle cooked dinners instead of ordering out. Their voices, when they called, carried less entitlement, more humanity. It was not perfection, but it was progress. And me, I found my own renewal. I joined a book club, even went on a hike with a group of neighbors. One woman, kind eyes and a quick wit, laughed at the same jokes I did. She reminded me that life wasn't finished at 68. Looking back, I realized something. I didn't just take back money. I took back dignity. I showed my daughter that family isn't measured in checks, but in respect. I showed myself that age does not mean surrender. So here's my last word to you. If you think Edward Hale made the right choice, comment right. If you believe you would have chosen another path, share it. Because these stories, painful as they are, belong to all of us. Sometimes love means giving. Sometimes love means stepping back. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give is the chance for others to finally stand on their own feet. Story 2. At my brother's promotion party at the downtown athletic club, Ryan raised his Tito's and soda high above the crowd of Austin tech executives. To family, he announced with that trademark smirk. And to my sister, Maddie fired again from another tech company. Maybe she should stick to content creation instead of pretending she belongs in real tech. The laughter from Goldman and Partners executives felt like ice water in my veins. Our father, Bob Parker, chuckled and clinked his glass. At least she's got the looks for it, he added, earning another round of chuckles from the crowd of venture capitalists and startup founders gathered on the rooftop terrace overlooking Lady Bird Lake. The crowd's laughter froze when David Chen, CEO of TechCore Solutions, walked through the glass doors. His eyes locked on me across the room, and I knew immediately that something had shifted in the universe. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been Madison Parker, senior data scientist at TechCore Solutions, one of Austin's fastest-growing AI startups. I'd built the machine learning models that predicted customer churn with 94% accuracy. I'd designed the data pipeline that processed 50 million transactions daily without breaking a sweat. I'd been the reliable one, the problem solver, the woman who turned caffeine and Python code into million-dollar solutions. But that Tuesday morning, at 10:23 a.m., security had appeared at my standing desk in the open concept office that screamed, "We're disrupting everything." The Austin tech scene was supposed to be different, less corporate BS, more merit-based than Silicon Valley. But here I was, packing my life into a cardboard box while my coworkers pretended to focus on their MacBooks. "Ma'am, I need you to pack your personal items now," the security guard had said, his Texas drawl making the corporate execution feel surreal. My hands had shaken as I gathered my things, the succulent that had survived 3 Austin summers on my desk. The photo of Mom and me at UT graduation, my collection of conference badges from SXSW Interactive. The hardest part was the framed certificate from when I'd presented our AI breakthrough at South by Southwest, the moment I'd felt like I'd finally made it in Austin's competitive tech ecosystem. I'd never been written up, never missed a sprint deadline, never given anyone reason to doubt my capabilities. But being perfect had never been enough in the Parker family. Growing up in Westlake Hills, I was the daughter who color-coded her homework planners while Ryan was getting suspended for vaping in the Tesla charging station at school. The first crack in my golden daughter facade came during senior year at Westlake High. Ryan had been caught paying someone to do his AP computer science projects not well, mind you, but enough to scrape into ACC and eventually transfer to UT. Instead of consequences, Dad bought him a brand new F-150 Raptor. He needs encouragement. Dad had explained when I asked why. My perfect 1,580 SAT score only earned me a pat on the head. I'd earned a full ride to UT Austin, graduated summa cum laude with degrees in computer science and statistics, and landed offers from Google, Meta, and 3 Austin unicorns before graduation. Dad's response: "That's nice. Sweetheart, Ryan's thinking about maybe applying for some tech internships this summer." But TechCore was supposed to be different. David Chen had built the company on merit, not connections. When I'd solved the server crash that would have cost us our biggest client, Dell Technologies, Chen himself had come to thank me. When I'd designed the security protocol that prevented a data breach during SXSW, I'd gotten a $15,000 raise and a promotion. For 3 years, I'd felt valued. I'd worked 70-hour weeks gladly because every machine learning model was a chance to prove myself. Every solved problem was evidence that I belonged in Austin's competitive tech scene. I'd found my place in the world of venture capital. IPO dreams, and changing the world rhetoric that defines South Austin's startup culture. I never talked about my successes at family dinners in our Terrytown mansion. Not because I was modest, but because I'd learned that my achievements made everyone uncomfortable. When I'd mentioned my promotion to senior data scientist, Ryan had rolled his eyes and said, "Must be nice having a boss who's into diversity hires." Dad had chuckled and changed the subject to Ryan's new girlfriend, a lifestyle influencer with 50 Kelvin's TikTok followers. They had a way of making my victories feel small. When I'd bought my first car, a Tesla Model 3 with my own money, Ryan had joked that I was showing off. When I'd moved into my own condo in the Seaholm district, Dad had wondered aloud why I was in such a hurry to leave the family. Every milestone became a reason for me to feel guilty instead of proud. The irony wasn't lost on me, as I sat in my car outside TechCore's sleek offices on South Lamar, watching tech workers stream in and out with their Patagonia vests. And Allbirds, the job that had finally made me feel worthy, was gone. And I hadn't even been given a real reason why. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "How's the startup life treating you?" Kiddo. I stared at it for a long time before typing back I got fired. His response came back in 30 seconds, a thumbs up emoji, and maybe time to try something more stable. Then Ryan's text arrived, no words. Just a gif of someone pole dancing with crying laughing emojis. He'd managed to turn my professional devastation into a joke before I'd even processed what had happened. But then my phone rang. Unknown number, with a 512 area code. "Madison. This is David Chen." His voice sounded different, strained, almost whispered. "We need to talk in person tonight. There's something you need to know about why you were fired. Something about your brother." The coffee shop he chose was in North Austin, far from the South Lamar tech corridor where nobody from our industry would accidentally show up. Chen was already there when I arrived, hunched over a corner table with his back to the wall. He looked older than I remembered, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy that made my stomach clench. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I wasn't sure you would." "What's this about?" "Mr. Chen, if you're feeling guilty about firing me, I didn't fire you." The words came out flat. Definitive. "I was forced to let you go." I felt my face flush. Forced by who? He pulled out his iPhone and slid it across the table. On the screen was a photo, grainy but clear enough. A younger Chen at what looked like a college party, arm around a girl who couldn't have been more than 17, both of them holding red Solo cups, both clearly intoxicated. "This was 25 years ago," he said quietly. "A party at my fraternity at UT. That girl was my girlfriend's younger sister visiting for the weekend. Nothing happened. We were just talking, just posing for pictures, but without context. Understanding crept over me slowly. Someone threatened you with this. Your brother." Chen's voice was barely audible. "He showed up at our offices 3 weeks ago with this photo, and a fabricated report claiming I'd been inappropriate with female employees. Said he'd go to the media, to the board, to my wife. If I didn't clean house." The coffee shop suddenly felt too hot. "Clean house, fire you. Specifically you." Chen met my eyes. "He said you were getting too comfortable in your position, that you might start expecting promotions you hadn't earned. He wanted you gone before you could become a threat to his own career prospects." My hands were shaking now. His career prospects. Ryan doesn't even work in tech. He's been networking, apparently. He's friends with some of Goldman and Partners' clients, golf buddies with some venture capitalists. He mentioned wanting to apply for business development positions in our industry. Said having a sister in senior management might create conflicts of interest. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Ryan hadn't just destroyed my career, he'd planned it, calculated it, used fabricated evidence to force my boss into firing me so he could pursue opportunities in my field without having to compete with his more qualified sister. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Chen leaned forward. "Because I found out the photo was doctored. The girl in the picture, I tracked her down through Facebook. She's 38 now, married with 3 kids. Works as a pediatric nurse in Dallas. She confirmed the party was a college event, that she was 21 at the time. Your brother had digitally altered her appearance to make her look younger. You have proof. Enough to bury him." Chen pulled the phone back. "The question is, what do you want to do about it?" I thought about the invitation sitting on my coffee table in my see-home condo, about Ryan's smug face when he'd sent me that OnlyFans gif, about Dad's thumbs-up emoji when I'd told him I was fired, about 28 years of being treated like my achievements didn't matter in a city built on innovation and merit. "I want my job back," I said. "Done. You can start Monday if you want." Chen paused. "But I get the feeling you want something more than just your job back." He was right. Something was crystallizing in my mind. Not revenge exactly, but justice. Ryan thought he was untouchable because he'd always been Dad's favorite. Because he'd learned to charm his way out of consequences in a town where networking often mattered more than talent. "The promotion party," I said. "Will you be there?" Chen's eyebrows raised. "Your father invited the entire Goldman and Partners board, plus half the Austin Venture Partners Fund. It's supposed to be a networking event disguised as a family celebration. Perfect. A room full of the people Ryan wanted to impress, the connections he was counting on to build his career in my industry." Monday morning arrived with the strange feeling of walking back into TechCore through the same glass doors that had ejected me 3 weeks earlier. But this time, I wasn't Madison Parker, senior data scientist. I was a ghost. Chen had set up my new workspace in the basement server room, a climate-controlled space filled with humming machines and boxes of old financial records. "Officially, you're a contract security consultant, reviewing our data protocols," he explained, handing me a key card with no photo. "Unofficially, you have access to everything." The setup was perfect. Nobody questioned a contractor, poking around old files. Nobody looked twice at the woman in jeans and Allbirds carrying boxes of documents to her car. I started with Goldman and Partners public filings. The numbers didn't add up immediately, but after 3 days of cross-referencing expense reports with client billings, patterns emerged. Ryan's first red flag was subtle: a series of consulting payments to a company called Apex Consulting Group that didn't seem to exist anywhere except on paper. I traced the business registration to a Wyoming address, a virtual office paid for with a credit card that led back to one of Dad's LLC accounts. Apex Consulting had billed Goldman and Partners for $85. 0 inches market research and strategic planning. Over the past 6 months, the exact period when Ryan had been networking his way into their good graces, my hands were steady as I photographed every document on my iPhone. This wasn't just nepotism, this was fraud. The coffee shop across from Goldman and Partners became my second office. I'd sit by the window with my MacBook, watching employees come and go, learning their routines. Jennifer from accounting always grabbed lunch at Torchy's Tacos at 1230. Marcus from IT took vape breaks every hour on the dot. And Ryan. Ryan left for client meetings every Tuesday at 3:00 p.m. Those weren't client meetings. I followed him once, feeling ridiculous and exhilarated at the same time. His client meeting was actually a golf lesson at Austin Country Club, paid for with a Goldman and Partners corporate card. But the golf lessons were small change compared to what I found in the Miami receipts. Ryan had convinced Goldman and Partners to send him to 3 different fintech conferences in Miami over the past year. I called each conference organizer. 2 of the conferences didn't exist. The third had been canceled due to low registration. But somehow, Ryan had spent $12, 000, of company money during a week when he was supposedly attending sessions that never happened. The hotel receipts told a different story. room service charges for 2 people, spa-treatments, dinner reservations at Joe's Stone Crab that cost more than most people's rent. Each piece of evidence felt like a small victory. But I needed to understand how deep this corruption went and who else was involved. That's when I met Rosa Martinez. She was cleaning Chen's office one evening when I was pulling late-night archive duty. 60-something with shrewd eyes and the quiet confidence of someone who'd been ignored for so long that people forgot she had ears. "You're the girl who got fired," she said, matter-of-factly, emptying the trash can. "I'm a contractor now," I replied carefully. Rosa snorted. "Maya, I've been cleaning offices for 30 years. I know the difference between hired and rehired." She paused, studying my face. "Question is, what are you really doing down here in the basement?" Something about her directness made me decide to trust her. "I'm trying to prove that my brother destroyed my career to cover up his own crimes. The pretty boy who was here a few weeks ago, throwing around threats and acting like he owned the place." My pulse quickened. "You saw him, heard him, cleaned up after his little tantrum when Mr. Chen wouldn't play ball fast enough." Rosa set down her supplies and leaned against the desk. "He left some interesting papers in the conference room trash. Figured they might be important someday." She reached into her cleaning cart and pulled out a manila folder, slightly wrinkled but intact. Inside were printed emails between Ryan and someone named D. Goldman, presumably Dad's contact at Goldman and Partners. The emails were damning. Ryan hadn't just blackmailed Chen. He'd been coordinating with Dad to systematically eliminate me as competition in Austin's tech industry. They'd identified 3 other companies where I might potentially find work and had begun spreading rumors about my instability and family loyalty issues. "Your brother's not very smart," Rosa observed as I stared at the papers. "Left these sitting right on top, like he wanted someone to find them." "Why are you helping me?" I asked. Rosa's expression hardened. "Because 30 years ago, I was the smartest accountant in this city. But I was also a single mother who couldn't afford the right clothes or the right connections. Men like your brother and your father, they've been keeping women like us down for decades. Time. Someone fought back. The promotion party was now 5 days away. I had 3 boxes of evidence, a dozen witnesses, and a plan that would expose not just Ryan's corruption, but the entire network that had protected him. Saturday night arrived with the kind of perfect Austin weather that made the downtown athletic club's rooftop terrace feel like a stage set for tech industry theater. I pulled into the valet circle at exactly 7:20 p.m., 10 minutes early. Just as I'd planned, the valet who took my keys did a double take when he recognized me. Word traveled fast in Austin's insular tech scene. I was the Parker daughter who'd been fired. The family disappointment who somehow still had the audacity to show up looking composed in a navy blue Reformation dress that cost more than most people's car payments. I'd chosen the outfit carefully professional enough to command respect, expensive enough to signal I wasn't broken, and conservative enough that Dad couldn't find anything to criticize. Every detail was calculated. From my understated jewelry to the leather portfolio, I carried like armor. The club's main event space buzzed with conversation and clinking glasses. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Austin's skyline, each light representing someone's startup, dream, or IPO fantasy. Round tables draped in white linen filled the space. Each centerpiece, a small mountain of Texas wildflowers that probably cost more than I'd spent on groceries in a month. The bar was doing steady business, and I could already spot familiar faces from Goldman and Partners, mingling with Dad's usual crowd venture capitalists, real estate developers, and tech executives who turned Austin into the Silicon Hills. Ryan held court near the windows, his face flushed with Tito's and attention. Even from across the room, I could see he was already 3 drinks past professional. His laugh was too loud, his gestures too broad, his confidence inflated by the admiration of men who saw dollar signs when they looked at him. Didn't think you'd show. Kitto. Dad appeared beside me with his trademark smirk. The same expression he'd worn when I was 12 and had accidentally broken his golf trophy. No pole in this venue. The men around him chuckled on cue corporate executives who'd built careers on knowing when to laugh at the boss's jokes. I recognized most of them board members from various companies, partners from Austin's top law firms, the kind of men who made decisions about other people's futures. Over 18 holes at Austin Country Club. "Hello, Dad," I said, accepting the champagne a server offered. "Lovely party. Well, it's not every day your son becomes a VP at Goldman and Partners." His chest puffed with pride that had never been directed at me. Ryan's really found his calling. Natural leadership. You know, I sipped my champagne and nodded, scanning the room for Chen. He hadn't arrived yet. But I could see several people from TechCore scattered throughout the crowd. Some avoided my gaze entirely, probably uncomfortable about witnessing my professional execution. Others glanced at me with expressions I couldn't quite read: pity, curiosity, or maybe something closer to respect. "You were always too smart to fit in here," a voice said behind me. I turned to find Linda Goldman, one of the senior partner's wives. She was in her 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of confidence that came from decades of watching men underestimate women. "Mrs. Goldman," I said, surprised by her directness. "Oh, call me Linda. I've been watching you tonight. Dear, you carry yourself differently than the last time I saw you." She studied my face with the intensity of someone who'd learned to read people for survival, like someone who knows something the rest of us don't. Before I could respond, the sound of feedback from the microphone cut through the conversation. Ryan had claimed the small stage at the front of the room, swaying slightly as he adjusted the mic stand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his words slightly slurred but still commanding attention. "Thank you all for celebrating with me tonight. This promotion means everything to me. Proof that hard work and dedication really do pay off in Austin's competitive market." The irony wasn't lost on me. I watched Dad beam with pride. Watched the Goldman and Partners executives nod approvingly. Watched a room full of successful people celebrate a fraud to family. Ryan continued, raising his champagne glass high. His eyes found mine across the room, and his smile turned cruel. And to my sister, Maddie fired again. Maybe she should stick to content creation instead of pretending she belongs in real tech. The laughter that followed felt like acid in my veins. Not polite chuckles this time, but genuine amusement from people who thought my professional destruction was entertainment. Dad clinked his glass against someone else's, his grin wide enough to show his veneers. "At least she's got the looks for it." I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Instead, I looked toward the entrance and waited. The doors opened at exactly 8:15 p.m. David Chen walked in alone, and the shift in the room was immediate. Conversation heated. Heads turned. The man commanded respect in a way that had nothing to do with inherited wealth or family connections. He'd built TechCore from nothing into a $2 billion valuation through pure innovation. He didn't stop to greet anyone, didn't pause to shake hands or exchange pleasantries. He walked directly toward the stage with the focused intensity of a man on a mission, carrying a manila folder that seemed to weigh more than paper should. Ryan was still at the microphone, basking in the applause from his toast. When Chen stepped onto the small platform beside him, "Before you all celebrate, Ryan," Chen said, his voice cutting through the remaining chatter without needing amplification, "there's something you should know." The room went completely silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. You could sense the collective intake of breath from 200 guests who suddenly realized they were about to witness something unprecedented. Chen opened the folder in his hands, and I saw Ryan's face drain of color as he recognized some of the documents inside. "You blackmailed me, Ryan," Chen continued, his voice steady and clear. "You forged evidence, manipulated photos, and destroyed your sister's career to protect your own fraudulent activities." The silence stretched like a held breath. I watched Dad's champagne glass freeze halfway to his lips. Watched the Goldman and Partners executives exchange panicked glances. Watched Ryan's mouth open and close without producing sound. Then Chen turned toward me, his eyes finding mine across the frozen crowd. "Madison," he said, extending the folder in my direction. "Would you like to do the honors?" My hands were perfectly steady as I walked toward the stage. The folder felt weightless in my hands as I climbed the 3 steps to the platform. 200 pairs of eyes tracked my movement. But I could only focus on Ryan's face the way his confident smirk was melting into something closer to panic. I opened the folder deliberately, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. The first document I pulled out was a photocopy of a Goldman and Partners expense report. Ryan's signature scrawled across the bottom. "Authorizing $12, 000 for a Miami fintech conference that never existed." "This is interesting," I said, my voice carrying clearly without the microphone. "A business trip to attend the Southeast Blockchain Summit last March. Except when I called the organizers. They told me the event was canceled due to lack of interest." I held up the hotel receipt attached to the expense report. But somehow Ryan still managed to spend company money on a week-long stay at the Fontainebleau, including room service for 2 and spa treatments that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The first murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw several Goldman and Partners executives exchanging glances, their faces tight with the realization that their golden boy might not be so golden after all. "Wait," Ryan said, reaching for the microphone. There's an explanation for... There's more," I interrupted, pulling out the next document. "Apex Consulting Group, a company that billed Goldman and Partners $85, 000 for market research, over the past 6 months." I looked directly at Dad, whose champagne glass had gone completely still in his hand. "The company is registered to a Wyoming virtual office, paid for with a credit card linked to one of Robert Parker's LLC accounts. Apex Consulting doesn't have employees, doesn't have an office, and doesn't have any actual work product to show for nearly 6 figures in billing." The silence was deafening now. I could see people pulling out their phones, probably texting their lawyers or their wives or their business partners. This wasn't just a family drama anymore. This was a corporate scandal unfolding in real time. Dad finally found his voice. "Madison, I don't know what kind of lies I'm not finished," I said, and something in my tone made him close his mouth. The fabricated evidence against TechCore's CEO, the doctored photographs designed to look like inappropriate conduct with a minor, the systematic campaign to destroy my reputation at other companies in Austin's tech industry. I pulled out a printed email chain and held it up for the room to see. "These are communications between Ryan Parker and David Goldman, planning my professional destruction to eliminate me as competition. They identified 3 companies where I might find employment and began spreading rumors about my mental stability and family loyalty. David Goldman, a distinguished man in his 60s who sat at one of the front tables, had gone completely pale. His wife was staring at him with an expression that suggested this conversation would continue at home. "You want to know why I was really fired?" I continued, making eye contact with people throughout the room. "Because I was getting too good at my job. Because I might expect promotions I hadn't earned. Because having a competent woman in senior management might create conflicts of interest when Ryan decided to pursue opportunities in my field." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I watched Linda Goldman lean over to whisper something urgent in her husband's ear. Watched several other wives do the same thing at their respective tables. Ryan made one last desperate grab for control. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "She's clearly having some kind of breakdown. Everyone knows she's been unstable since she got fired." "Ryan," Chen's voice cut through his protests like a blade. "You're terminated. Effective immediately." The words hung in the air for a moment before their full impact hit. I reached into the folder one more time and pulled out an official termination letter printed on Goldman and Partners letterhead, signed with your own signature stamp, I said, handing him the document. "The same stamp you used to authorize fraudulent expense reports. Consider it poetic justice." Ryan's face turned the exact color of the red wine that someone had spilled on the white tablecloth nearby. His hands shook as he took the letter, and I watched 28 years of arrogance crumble in real time. But I wasn't done. "There's one more vote that was taken today," Chen announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "The Goldman and Partners Board of Directors held an emergency meeting this afternoon. Robert Parker has been removed from his position as chairman. Effective immediately." Dad's champagne glass finally slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor with a sound like a gunshot. The motion passed by a single vote. Chen continued. "The deciding vote was cast by the newest member of the board, someone who was unanimously approved this morning based on her extensive experience in data science and her demonstrated commitment to ethical business practices." Every eye in the room turned to me. I felt a strange calm settle over my shoulders, like putting on a coat that finally fit properly. "You cast the deciding vote." Dad's voice was barely above a whisper. I looked at him, really looked at him, for what felt like the first time in years. The man who had dismissed my achievements, laughed at my humiliation, and actively participated in destroying my career. "You taught me this game, Dad," I said quietly. "You just never expected me to play it better than you." Security appeared at the edge of the crowd, not dramatically, but with the quiet efficiency of professionals who had been briefed on the situation. Two men in dark suits waiting for their cue. Ryan was still staring at his termination letter when they approached. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice had lost all its earlier confidence. "You can't just, actually." "We can," Chen said. "And we have. Security will escort you both out." As they were led away, Ryan protesting loudly about betrayal and lawsuits. Dad maintaining his dignity, even as his world collapsed. Something extraordinary happened. Someone started clapping. It was Linda Goldman, her gloved hands coming together in slow, deliberate applause. Then her husband joined her. Despite everything. Then the woman at the next table. Then more. Within 30 seconds. Half the room was applauding. Not the polite golf clap of social obligation, but genuine appreciation for what they'd just witnessed. I raised my champagne glass toward the crowd, feeling lighter than I had in months. "To family," I said, echoing Ryan's earlier toast. And to finally being good at something. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel this time. It was cathartic, relieved, almost celebratory. I had become the story they thought they were writing, but with an ending none of them had seen coming. 6 months later, I stood in the corner office of TechCore's new headquarters in the Domain, looking out at the Austin skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The brass nameplate on my desk read Madison Parker, Chief Technology Officer. The office was impressive. Modern furniture, a conference table that could seat 12, and wall-mounted monitors displaying real-time data from our AI systems. But what struck me most was the sense of belonging. The knowledge that I'd earned every inch of this space. My first all-hands meeting as CTO had been standing room only. I'd outlined my vision for the company: transparent promotion processes, anonymous reporting systems for ethical concerns, regular salary audits to ensure pay equity, and mandatory bias training for all management positions. This isn't about punishment. I told the packed conference room. It's about building something better. The questions that followed were thoughtful, challenging, and honest. These people weren't just looking for job security, they wanted to be part of something meaningful. My phone had rung 3 times that first week. Dad's number appeared twice. I'd sent both calls to voicemail without listening to the messages, then blocked his number entirely. Some ghosts aren't meant to haunt you. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is let them fade into irrelevance. Ryan's LinkedIn profile now listed him as exploring new opportunities, tech bro speak for unemployed and unemployable. Word traveled fast in Austin's tight-knit startup community. His reputation preceded him now, and not in the way he'd hoped. On my desk, I kept a single photograph, Mom and me at my UT graduation, both of us grinning like we'd conquered the world. She'd been gone for 6 years now, but I could still hear her voice clearly. Don't let them convince you that silence is grace. Madison, she'd said during one of our last conversations when I'd been complaining about a professor who kept dismissing my contributions in class. Sometimes the most graceful thing you can do is refuse to be quiet. I finally understood what she meant. The tech industry was supposed to be different, merit-based, innovative, forward-thinking. But scratch the surface of any company, even in progressive Austin, and you'd find the same old boys' club that had existed for decades. The same men who thought women were too emotional for leadership, too threatening to the established order, too ambitious for their own good. But change was coming. I could see it in the young women who interviewed for positions on my team, in their confidence and their refusal to apologize for their intelligence. I could see it in the policies we were implementing, in the culture we were building, in the quiet revolution happening one hire at a time. My assistant knocked on the door, a brilliant young woman named Sarah, who'd graduated from UT's computer science program with a 4.0 gigapascals and enough confidence to negotiate her starting salary. Miss Parker, the venture capital presentation is ready for your review. I smiled, remembering when I'd been too intimidated to negotiate anything, when I'd been grateful just to have a seat at the table instead of demanding the respect I'd earned. Thank you, Sarah. And remember, it's Madison. We don't do hierarchical formality here. As she left, I turned back to the window overlooking Austin's skyline. Somewhere out there, other women were fighting their own battles against systems designed to keep them small. Some would win. Some would lose. But the important thing was that they were fighting. I picked up my phone and opened a new document. It was time to write my story, not the sanitized version that would make men comfortable, but the real story, the story of a woman who refused to stay silent, who learned that sometimes the most graceful thing you can do is burn down the system that underestimates you. The story began with a simple sentence. They thought they could break me, but they forgot that I was the one who understood how systems really work. Outside my window, Austin hummed with the energy of a city that never stopped innovating, never stopped dreaming, never stopped believing that the next big idea was just around the corner. And for the first time in my life, I knew I was exactly where I belonged.